insurance with the Name Your Price tool, offering a range of coverage and price options to choose from. Now that's Progressive. More at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. And by certified financial planner professionals trained in providing...
You pay attention with so much at stake.
Seas are rising and chronic flooding will be the new normal.
You navigate, you listen, you keep an ear out. You pay attention, and so do we. We tell the stories of our time every day.
In the 26th day of testimony and on the 139th witness, Shahar Tsarnaev wept.
We unearth what would otherwise stay hidden.
There's just a lot of hate in this world, and that day, for that hour, we were humans.
Across the street.
The Red Sox have won the World Series.
And around the globe.
It's here and now.
This is modern love.
This is WBUR's All Things Considered.
This is only a game.
This is On Point.
This is Radio Boston.
On air, online, on demand, and on stage in the heart of Boston.
I'm Jack Lepiars. Welcome to WBUR CitySpace.
Always looking forward, paying attention, and knowing that your story is one of our stories.
Good morning. I'm Bob Oates.
I'm Lisa Mullins.
I'm Meghna Chakrabarty.
I'm Jeremy Hobson.
This is 90.9 WBUR Boston.
Hi, my name's Amy McDonald. How many people here is your first time here? Isn't it gorgeous? Yes. So 1 month down, we opened a month ago. We had a full slate for the month of March. Now April Fool's Day. Do you hear Tom Brady's retiring? It's beginning our second month. The first Monday of every month, we have conversations with chefs. We're so happy to have Joanne Chang here tonight. At the end of the conversation, we're going to be serving her mini sticky buns out in the lobby. Do check our website, wbur.org/events or wbur/cityspace, and see the array of things we have going on. We have performances, we have policy discussions, we've had live podcasts, we've had dance. It's I like to call it the 92nd Street Y of Boston. So do come and visit us again. And welcome Sheryl Julian and Joanne Chang.
Well, Joanne, you should know that I'm a failed baker. I like to say I became a journalist because I couldn't keep the case in the bakery that I babysat for 2 weeks by myself full. So I have flour envy, to say the least. So about 10 years ago, I moderated a panel you sat on at Boston University, and I asked you what advice you gave young bakers. And you told me this very interesting story. You said that you wanted to train them in the niceties of life, what I call the mismanners when I teach. And so you put some cards up on the bulletin board. They were just, they were to be thank you notes. They had envelopes and they had stamps, and everyone was to send a card to someone. And I want you to take over and tell me what happened when someone came up to you and had never written one of these before.
So we still do that.
Mm-hmm.
Every year, about mid to late summer, we send out a newsletter to all of the staff every other week that comes out with their paycheck. And stapled to the newsletter about mid to late summer is a thank you note. And in the newsletter, it says, I want you to take this thank you note and write a thank you to somebody in your life. Take 3 minutes and just think of somebody and pop it in the mail or hand it to them, and you will be amazed at how great it makes. Not only will it make them feel great, but you'll feel great because you will have spent time thanking somebody that has done something wonderful for you. And I think the story that you're thinking of is that, so the very first time we did it was probably about 10 years ago. And I think it was more than one staff member who came up to me with the thank you card and said, there's nothing in this card. What is it for? So they clearly hadn't read the newsletter, which was a little disappointing for me. But they just had never really known what to do with it. And so taking the time to kind of explain to them this whole process of just finding somebody in your life that you want to thank and send the card.
So if you were to pinpoint one thing that your counterworkers, who are mostly young, need to do better, what would it be?
The one thing I feel we all need to do better, but especially if you're young and you grew up, if you're 22 or under, is learn how to make eye contact. That's something that I'm surprised at how few people do nowadays. And we are a little bit to blame at the bakery. We have these little handheld devices. So if you come to the bakery and place an order, the staff member's reading this thing to place your order. And so they're not as engaged as they used to be before we had the handhelds. But I think being able to make eye contact with people and to see people is something that is not necessarily natural to us, especially as we grow older. And so I'm always talking to the staff about making eye contact, not just to the guests, but also with each other, and to try to be a little present, because our lives are going so quickly and everybody's on their phones all of the time or on the handhelds. So that's something that I'm always pushing.
Okay. So let's talk about your childhood. You were raised in Texas by Taiwanese American parents,
yes,
whom you call Mama Chang and Papa Chang. I love the story you tell about going to someone's house and getting meatloaf and mashed potatoes and not eating, and the mother becoming a little curious. And what happened then?
So she was very concerned because my best friend Linda said, why don't you just stay for dinner? And I asked my mom if I could stay, and she said yes. She lived next door. And I got the meatloaf and the peas and the potatoes, and I just sat there waiting. And her mom said, are you okay? And I said, where's the rice? And she said, no, there's no rice. There's meatloaf and potatoes and peas. And I just thought, but you can't eat without rice. I mean, I was like 6 or 7 at the time, so I literally never had a meal without rice. The other thing about that meal was at the end of eating the mashed potatoes and the peas and the meatloaf, none of which I'd ever had before, I was done with dinner and I thought, okay, we're done. We got to go play or whatever. And Linda sat there and her mom went and got chocolate cake and brought us cake. And I thought, there's more? And then it was cake, which I hadn't really ever had before at that point because I didn't grow up with desserts. My parents never had desserts. And so we only ate oranges at the end of meals. Sometimes we'd have, apples or mangoes, but it was mostly oranges. So when I had that first bite of cake, I just was blown away. Like, whoa, what am I missing?
I liked the response that you wrote about in one of the flour cookbooks. That she said, do you only have Chinese food at home?
Yes.
And you said, no, we have food.
Yeah, I was like, no, we have food. I didn't know there was a distinction because, again, I had only eaten what we all think of as Chinese food, but to me it's just food.
Right. So you landed up majoring in mathematics at Harvard. And were your parents pretty interested in your academic success? And then what did they think when you decided to become a baker?
So I did end up, after graduating, I did spend 2 years as a management consultant. So I did kind of do the right thing in their eyes. And I really enjoyed it. It was a great job and I learned a lot. But I knew it wasn't what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life. And I knew in looking at my boss and my boss's boss that I didn't want to end up being them, even though I liked them very much and I'm still friends with a couple of them. But I didn't know what to do next. And all of my peers were going on to business school. Some of them were staying within the company. And I just thought, what am I going to do now? Because everybody's doing, staying or going to business school. I don't want to do either of those things. But I fell in love. I'd always loved to cook and bake, and I thought if I try this for a year, then it'll give me a year to figure out what to do. And so that's when I got my first job in a restaurant. So I remember calling my parents, who had no idea that I was interviewing for another job, and I said, I just got offered a job as a prep cook at a restaurant. So I'm quitting, and I'm starting my new job in 2 weeks. And they were
taking a deep pay cut.
I took a very, very deep pay cut, a very, very different schedule. And they were, shocked, upset, frustrated, angry, I'm sure, all of those things. But they lived in Dallas, and I lived here. So there was only so much they could. This is before the internet and everything. So all they could do was call me and be upset. And I would just say, I don't want to talk anymore. And I would hang up the phone.
So tell us about the notes that you sent everybody to say that you were leaving. So in the days before email.
Exactly. So again, this was 1993. So this is before email, and everybody had a physical mailbox, right? There was this big place where you had your name in a little box, and that's where your mail went. And so I ended up, I told my parents, I know you're upset, I understand, but I'm just going to try this for a year, and then I'll come back. I'll come back to the consulting firm, or I'll go to law school, or whatever it is that you think I should do. I promise I'll do that, but I just want to take this year and do this. So then I gave notice at the consulting firm, and I sent a memo letting everybody know, because this is how you let people know. You couldn't just send an email saying, I'm leaving. You had to write a little note to everybody. So I printed out a little memo that said, I'm leaving, and this is what I'm doing. And I attached a chocolate chip cookie to each memo that I put in everybody's mailbox. And the subject line of the memo was, one day these cookies will be famous. But I was totally kidding. I wasn't really thinking that far ahead. I was just, I'm going to go cook. It's going to be so fun. I thought, this will be so cute, and I'll put a cookie. One day these cookies will be famous. And, and here we are. And
okay, so they are. So what is it about your cookie that makes it your cookie?
I mean,
what did you do? You start out with the Toll House.
We started out with
back of the packet.
Toll House. We changed the chocolate, the actual chocolate, so that it's really, really good chocolate. And we've actually tested, it was probably about 22 or 23 different kinds of chocolate to find the right kind of chocolate that will not melt. So if you take a flour chocolate chip cookie, there's big chunks of chocolate, but there's also smaller pieces of chocolate that have melted, and then there's milk chocolate in there. So we changed the chocolate.
So what kind of chocolate is it?
We use Cho chocolate, which is based out of California.
Mm-hmm.
We used to use Scharfenberger, but then we switched to Cho about probably 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then the flour in the chocolate chip cookie is half high gluten flour and half regular flour, so that's what's different. And there's a touch more salt. Other than that, it's not that, there's nothing else different. We bake it for a certain amount of time so that it's not too baked through. It's a little bit soft in the center. We let the batter rest for 24 hours.
So I'm not going to get too geeky about baking, because I'll do that later when I have Joanne to myself. But just one thing. So there's a new technique going around called pan banging.
Yeah.
Maybe you can explain it and say, why everyone's going crazy about it.
So a pan banging cookie, I didn't know how to name, is when you take the cookie after it's been put in the oven, and after a couple minutes you take it out and then you bang it a little bit, and then you put it back in, and then you take it out and bang it. And what it does is every time you bang it, the batter settles a little bit, and so it's all wrinkly at the edges until you get to the center where it looks like a normal cookie. And I think what people really like about it is that you get all of those crispy caramelized parts from the batter settling and then going back into the oven and cooking. And so it just tastes a little bit more crunchy and caramelized and more delicious.
It's taking the internet by storm.
Yes, and it looks really cool. So if you go on Instagram, you can find it.
Yes. When you either were still working or had first started, when you were still working at the consulting group or had just started to go off and work in a restaurant, you were doing pop-up dinners. In your, were they just in your apartment?
Yeah, just
with bring your own chair and stuff like that?
Exactly. I mean, there were just dinner parties.
Yeah.
I would take a cookbook and tell everybody, again, there was no email, so I would physically put a thing in the mailbox saying, hey, if you're interested, I'm cooking from the Splendid Table this Friday.
And were they $10 or?
No, they were free.
They were free?
Yeah, it was just dinner parties that I had
would you do them
friends.
again? Okay. So you decided to first you did savory cooking. You were on the
For 1 year, yeah.
And then you decided to become a baker.
Right.
Who hires somebody who knows nothing except
right?
has worked at home and had a good time?
I mean, Lydia Shire hired me first. I knew nothing. I just said, I will do anything you want me to do. So she hired me first, and I did savory cooking for a year at her restaurant, Biba, and learned so much from her and Susan Regis. And then the second job I had was with Rick Katz, who had just opened a bakery in Newton Center. And at that point, I didn't know nothing because I'd spent a year with Lydia, but I didn't know anything about professional baking. And I think for him, having come from Lydia's kitchen, I think that for him was enough of a push to allow me into his kitchen.
And he was pretty exacting.
He was extremely exacting, yes, yes.
One of the people who you worked for, Jamie Mamano, he had an expression that you took with you throughout your career and to every flower employee. What was that?
Yes, he has I think he's actually at this point painted it above his office, but he had an expression that he would say all the time, which is he would come by our station and look at us and look at our stuff and say, "Perfect, will be just fine, thank you," and he would walk away. And you just start to think that all of the time. If you hear it every single day, you're looking at your dishes and like, okay, perfect, will be just fine, okay.
So was it a foregone conclusion that you would open a restaurant?
No.
A bakery?
No, not at all. When I worked at Biba, then I worked at Bentwood Bakery, and then I was the pastry chef at Rialto. And I think at that point I started to wonder, okay, now I've been doing this for 2 or 3 years, and my parents were no longer really upset because they could see that I was really enjoying my work. But I didn't know what the path was. I didn't know what am I going to be when I grow up. And I just kept thinking, well, I'll just keep learning, hopefully, and finding places where I can learn and just get better. And so then I went to New York, and I think it was when I was in New York, I thought, gosh, now what do I do? Because I could have stayed in New York.
Well, you should say you were at Paillard.
I was at Paillard,
yes.
Paillard Patisserie. I helped open.
You just went to the top every place you went.
Yes, I did.
Best.
Because I kept wanting to push myself, and and there was definitely an element of what you don't know is better for you. Like I had no idea that these places were the top. I had just asked people, where should I go, and I presented myself.
Someone
to
said
them.
Francois
Paillard.
Okay.
Francois Paillard. I said okay, and I showed up and I said, can I work here? And honestly, if you just say I'll work for free, most people will hire you. And so I kept saying I'll do anything and I'll work for free. I never did work for free. I ended up getting paid, but I think it was when I was in New York that I thought I can stay in New York. I can become a New York person. I can become a pastry chef. I had offers to work in a couple restaurants after Paillard. But then I thought, no, I really want to come back to Boston for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to come back because Christopher was here. He was somebody that I was friendly with, had a crush on, but I wasn't together.
Former boss.
At
Rialto.
Yes. But I thought, well, I'll never be with him if I'm in New York. So I said, I'll come back to Boston. But I also did, at that point, think to myself, gosh, I wonder if I could open something of my own. Just a little itty-bitty bakery, making cookies and muffins and brioche and sell them. I mean, I really had this idea that it would be like a small little kiosk, and I would be the only person working. I would bake, I would sell it, I would close it down, everything. So that was kind of my idea. The first time when I was in New York, I was thinking, okay, I'll come back to Boston and I'll do that.
Okay, so fast forward to the year 2000. Or probably the year before, you decide you're opening a bakery. What bank is giving a woman a loan for a bakery on a stretch of the South End that has no new commercial ventures, probably no new commercial ventures in the last 25 years, and so let's say, did they say no? The banks say no? And how did you put the financial package together?
Well, I didn't start with banks because like you, I was like, who's going to lend money to me? I don't know anything about anything. I started with friends and family, and I just asked everybody. And I asked my mom, well, I asked my parents, Mom and Dad, will you lend me some money? And they said, we'll think about it. And then my mom said, you should talk to your uncles, her 2 brothers. And so I wrote a whole business plan and I sent it to them. And I still remember one of them, wrote back to me or called me and said, are you putting money into this? And I was like, no. I mean, I didn't have any money, but I was like, no. And he said, well, I'm not going to put my money in it unless you put some money in it, because you have to prove to me that you're willing to risk your own money before I risk my money. So at the time, I really didn't have any money, except when I was working at the consulting firm, my office mate, who was a very conservative, really smart, money guy, said to me, I was 22 out of college when I first started working at this firm, and he said, you should start investing in mutual funds. And I didn't even know what that meant. But so I said, Jeff, what does that mean? And he said, take whatever percent, 10, 15% of your salary and just put it in mutual funds. So I did. I said, okay, help me pick some, and he helped me pick some. So for 2 years, I saved money. So when it came time in 2000 to get ready to open Flower, and my uncles were like, well, we'll give you money, but first you have to prove that you really believe in your idea by putting your own money. I said to them, okay, I don't have any money, but I do have these mutual funds. I guess I could sell them. And they said, sell them. And I said, okay. So I sold them. I didn't have that. I think it was like $10,000. But at the time, I mean, it's still a lot of money, but at the time it was like everything I had. So I put it in. My parents put in a little bit of money, and then my uncles put up the rest. So I know I was very lucky to have relatives who were able to help finance the bakery. So they're still partners. Or what they did was they put the money in, or they put the shares in their kids' names, my cousins, and just to make sure that the family always stays together. So.
Oh, that's very sweet. So you have some partners, or financial partners. Okay. So you've written that first year was very grim. You lived above the bakery. You got up at 2 a.m.
Yep.
You would go downstairs into the bakery. The sugar shakers weren't filled, and nothing was right. Okay, and but your mother told you to persist.
Yes.
How did she come and help you? And
so my mom actually took a leave of absence from her job when we opened the bakery, and moved in with me for about 4 months, and slept on. I think I must have slept on the couch and she slept in the bed. Maybe we slept in the same bed, I can't remember. But I remember she moved in with me for 4 months. And she worked at the bakery. She was somebody that I could trust, that at any day, at any hour of the day, if I needed her, if she wasn't already there, I could call her and say, the dishwasher just quit, can you come help? Or I need help scooping muffins, can you come help? And then she would help. So my mom moved in with me and really, spent all of her time and energy helping me, for that first initial 3 or 4 months. But the first year was very grim in that it's really, really hard to have an idea in your head about your dream little bakery, and in your head you know exactly what it's going to look like and how beautiful the pastries are going to be and how grateful everyone's going to be to work there and be there, and the weather's always going to be nice and there's never going to be a snowstorm, and then you open up and of course there were moments that were great, but there were so many moments that the muffins weren't quite right, or the sugar shakers were empty, and the customer would be really upset, like, I'm trying to get to work and there's no sugar, and it's just hard to put your everything into something and not have it be exactly like you like it, and have only slept for 3 or 4 hours the night before, every single night for months at a time. I mean, it was literally for 10 months, I did not work. I worked every single day, and I opened, at 2 or 3 in the morning, every single day for 10 months. So you start to get in your head and nothing feels quite right. And so I called my mom and I said, I can't do this anymore. And at that point she had moved back home to Dallas with my dad. And she said, just stick it out for 2 more months. I think in her head she thought, if you just do it for a year, then you can say.
A marker.
Yeah, a year was like, okay, you tried it. So I said, okay, I will. And then I also called Christopher, who was the owner of a restaurant called Radius at the time, and kind of gave him the same speech, like, well, I can't do this, what do I do? And he said, Joanne, you have to just stick with it and figure out, like, what's making your life so miserable right now? And he made me stop and just think what was making it miserable. I was opening every single morning. That was ridiculous. I wasn't trusting anybody to do anything. That was ridiculous too. And I wasn't doing a great job of taking what I knew, what I wanted in my head, and sharing it with the dozen or so employees that I had. So I was frustrated all of the time, but I should have been frustrated at myself because I thought the place should look like X, and I would come in and it would look like Y, and I would just get mad instead of saying, hey, let me show you, this is what it should look like, this is what it should feel like, this is what it should taste like, smell like, etc. So in those 2 months, between the 10th month when I was ready to sell it, I kind of did all of those things. I promoted somebody to help me with the bake-off. I spent way more time actually being patient and explaining to people what I wanted rather than just losing my cool. And I just tried really hard to get through every day by communicating better and being a better leader rather than thinking that I had to be the best baker, the best manager, the best dishwasher.
You did something wonderful that you probably don't know. I won't tell you who it is, but I had a student who really, really wanted to learn to bake. And she was a hostess in a restaurant at night. And she said, what do you think I should do? I said, I think you should call Joanne Chang and offer to work for free. And she called you up, and she said, I'll work for free. And by the way, I'll be there at 4 a.m. And she would go home, she'd sleep for a couple hours after her night job, and she would go to your bakery at 4 a.m., and then she became a professional baker.
Who is that?
Yeah, I'll tell you later.
Okay.
You own 8 flour locations. You told someone that you opened the second one because you wanted to give the first people an opportunity to expand.
Exactly.
So what about 3, 4, 5, and so on?
I mean, kind of the same reason. Like, we opened the second one to allow, Sarah, who was our pastry cook, to rise to pastry chef. Nicole, who was my assistant, to rise to pastry chef of the first location. Jake, who was a counterstaff member, to become a manager at the second location. So we, had all of these places and positions for all of these people who wanted to continue to grow. And then I don't know why I thought, okay, I'll do that and then that'll be it, because then I had 2 sets of staff that wanted to grow. And so, after a couple years of doing F2, I had even more people who said, well, I want an opportunity, and I want something, and I want something. And I just thought, gosh, okay. And that's kind of what ended up happening is every time we grow, there's even more people. And, we really try to create this culture of teaching people how to be good people, but also how to be good leaders and good bakers and good hospitality professionals, and the more places we open, the more opportunity we have to hopefully teach people all of those skills.
I wrote a story on a tea company that I really liked because everywhere I went I was having their tea, called Mem Tea, and when I went to the tea factory for a tasting, they said the staff of flowers, some of the staff people in flower are coming, and so they went around the table. There were like a dozen people. They went around the table. They introduced themselves, and there were literally everyone from dishwasher to brioche makers, and they had spent the entire day going to markets. They were tasting tea at this point. They had gone to other bakeries. And I thought it was a wonderful program. So is this sort of a rewards program?
So this is called the FIT Tour, the Flower Information Tour. And once you've worked at Flower for more than 2 months, you're supposed to go to the FIT Tour at your 2-month mark. But sometimes there's people who've been there for a couple years who just haven't had the opportunity because it has to align with your schedule. We do it every month. But it is an opportunity for the staff to see kind of behind the scenes what happens at Flower. And so they go to Mem Tea and they taste these teas that they've been selling. They go to Fazenda, the local coffee roaster that we use, and they do a cupping and they see the coffee being roasted. They go to Katsarubis, the produce company that we use, and they get to taste some different kinds of foods that they might not have tried before, and they get a tour of the facilities where we get our produce. And then we also take them to the Pine Street Inn, where we partner with the Pine Street Inn, and they get a tour of the facilities, and they're encouraged to sign up to help volunteer. And then they go see our commissary bakery, and they get a talk from me, a talk from our director of ops, and a little talk from a bunch of different managers within the bakery. And the hope is that by the end of that day, that they've got a better sense of flour as a big picture versus just whether they're dishwasher or brioche maker, they can understand where they fit in the broader scheme, and that it gives them a better sense of like their importance and the impact that they make working at Flour.
The woman who is leading it did a very interesting exercise. She went around because she wanted to, I think that they had been touring and now they were sort of congregated quite close together, and she wanted to make a little friendly table. And so she went around and she said, tell us something in a sentence about yourselves that very few people know. And she said, I'll begin with myself. And she always wanted to walk on a tightrope or something. And it was just very interesting answers around the table because, of course, they were such a diverse group. So you have a production kitchen in Alston. And
we've actually moved it.
Oh, did you?
We moved it in October to IDB, the Innovation and Design Building, near the cruise ships in South Boston.
For more space?
For more space, and because the location in Alston that we were at, which we really loved, is owned by Harvard. And if you've been in that area recently, they're totally like redoing that whole neighborhood.
Right.
And so Harvard wants to do something with that space.
Because you, at the beginning, kept such a tight rein on the first flour, probably the second and third as well, until you had to give up some of, give it up. What are your hard and fast kitchen rules? And I read that one of them is that on time means you're 5 minutes early.
So they're not just kitchen rules, they are kind of flour rules.
Yes, flour rules.
So we call it flour time, which is if you're on time, you're late. And if you're 5 minutes early, then you're on time. Essentially what we're trying to teach people is that if your shift starts at 8 o'clock, you cannot come in at 8 and think that you're on time. You have to come in at 7:50, 55, so that you have time to like put on your apron and then show up ready to work. So flour time is one rule. The mom test is another rule, and it comes directly from my mom working the counter when I was doing the bake-off, and that is, would you present this sandwich or this pastry or this interaction, would you give that to your mom? And we try to instill in everybody to take a moment to stop every time they look at something that they're putting into a bag or wrapping up for a sandwich and ask themselves, is this mom worthy? Another rule is no swearing, which is a big part of flour, which a lot of people have a hard time with when they first come, and then I hope that they get used to it and then start to appreciate it. And it's hard to do that in a kitchen where swearing is pretty common. And I have to say that at Myers & Chang, we're not quite as good at that rule. But I mean, I don't mean that, if something drops on your foot and you say the F-bomb or whatever, that's okay. I get that happens. But I don't let them just talk and use the F-bombs all, left and right. It can't be part of your everyday language. And so we talk about how flour is very family friendly, and that means both in the back of house and the front of house.
So what happens if you find out that somebody who is running to the ladies' room does not have urinary tract infection? She actually is, taking something in the ladies' room every few hours. Drugs, alcohol, all those things that come into a kitchen all the time.
Well, I mean, they don't come into our kitchen in that, they might. I don't want to be naive and say that nobody's ever done that. But, it's different for a restaurant because at a restaurant there is alcohol that's readily available. But at the bakery, we just don't physically have it anywhere.
Right.
If somebody is impaired, then we take them aside and we talk to them. And we've had that issue a couple of times where we've had to just look somebody in the eye and say, have you been drinking or are you on something? But we really try to create an environment that is a certain culture, and that if you don't fit into that culture, then it's not a great place for you. And that doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that we're bad people. It just means it's not the right fit. And so we really try, like I feel like it would be tough for somebody to come into work drunk every day because it would just not fit in. Like everybody at the bakery is, for the most part, not that way. I mean, I'm not saying like the occasional hangover that happens. I know that sometimes, somebody got high the night before and maybe they're still kind of high. I feel like that probably happens. But, regular drug use or alcohol abuse, I just don't feel like it would fit. It's too busy of an environment. It is pretty upbeat for the most part, I would like to think. You do have me running around all the time, like, how are you? How's it going? And I just feel like it would feel very weird.
Okay. So I was once walking through a hotel lobby with the general manager, and we were just walking a very short distance, and it took about 5 minutes because he had to straighten a chair, he had to unfurl the edge of a rug, he had to pick some lint off the couch. And I'm wondering what happens when you walk into Flowers and you see a sugar shaker not full.
So nowadays, I take pictures a lot because I don't want to go, I know all of the staff, but I don't know them well enough to go up to them and tell them they're not doing something correctly, because that would just stink, like at this point, I'm not, the pastry chef baker who's been working by your side for the last 39 hours and in the 40th hour have feedback. It's like the owner who's coming in, and I don't want to go up to somebody who I haven't seen in a week and say, hey, how come the sugar's not filled? So what I do is I'll take a picture and then I will share it with the manager. And the managers I see much more regularly, so it's easier for me to give them feedback. And I'll just say, hey, can you, have the team member change this or whatever. But it is hard. On my day off, Christopher always wants to go to the bakery because it's like our day off and we can like go have sweets, and I can't, because as soon as I walk into the bakery, there's just something or some things that I'll need to change.
There's lint on the couch.
Exactly.
What do you do about gluten-free requests?
So we have, I think, a pretty decent selection of really great gluten-free items. We have gluten-free bread, a couple gluten-free cookies, a couple gluten-free cakes. So we have a small selection of gluten-free pastries. We are not a gluten-free facility, so we let everybody know that. Like, there's flour everywhere in the air, but the actual items we can guarantee haven't been made with flour.
So you and Christopher opened Myers & Chang in 2007, and it sounds like from your Myers & Chang cookbook that you opened the restaurant instead of having a wedding. Is that
essentially?
Okay.
Well, we got engaged and we were planning the restaurant all about the same time, and it was so much easier to plan the restaurant. It was just something we had both done before. And
planning a wedding.
Yes, and planning a wedding was just, actually we never planned a wedding because we couldn't get past the guest list. Like we kept saying, let's do a small wedding. And then, well, if you invite that person, then we have to invite this person. And it kept escalating to 200 and some people, and then we'd start over again. No, we can't have that big wedding. Let's do a small wedding. And we must have done that 3 or 4 times, and finally we just said, let's just open a restaurant instead.
Okay. So what is it like working and sleeping with the same person?
I've heard from other couples who work together how challenging it can be, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not to say that like everything is perfect all the time, but for Christopher and me, we are so totally opposite in pretty much everything that it's really great working with somebody who is not interested in the things that I'm interested in, and I'm not interested in his things, but they all cover the restaurant and the bakeries. And he's somebody, and I was just telling the staff this, I just had a meeting right before this with some of the newer managers. It was a meeting on self-awareness, and how do you become a stronger manager is if you're aware of who you are. And I said one way to become self-aware is to have that person in your life who will tell you all the dirty stuff about you, who will lift up all the the rocks and point out all the bad things. But you need to have that person be somebody that you trust completely, so that they're not just trying to make you feel bad. And I think this is where Christopher and I work so well together, because we're able to critique each other in our respective positions within the bakery and the restaurant, and we can be really firm and really harsh even, but we both know that we're doing it with love and that we're doing it for the better of the bakery or the restaurant, and so it never escalates. So, I mean, it's been really great for me because, again, he's so good at things I'm not good at and vice versa.
So you work the line once a week. Do you still do that?
Mm-hmm.
And does he work the front of the house?
He's in the front. He's typically there more in the daytime. And then I'm on the line for a couple hours. I don't like work a position, but I fill in on Monday nights and Friday nights at the restaurant.
Busy nights.
Yeah.
Or Friday nights, busy night. You have a most interesting way of cooking rice without a rice cooker. That I read about, that I read in the Myers and Chang book, that seems almost like Persian rice, which I thought was interesting because it's your mother's method, that you wash the rice several times and then you cook it uncovered for 5 minutes, and then you cover it and cook it for another 10,
steam,
and then you let it steam for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And you make beautiful rice, and I never understand how, because I've made rice in a rice cooker, and by the time an hour has passed by, my rice is terrible. I mean, it's sitting in the rice cooker in a dense cake, and I've never understood how restaurants make this wonderful rice. So do you make just big vats of rice cooker rice?
Well, at the restaurant, now we have a rice cooker, but the reason for the book, we said you don't have to have, and growing up, we only had a rice cooker, honestly, but when we opened Myers and Chang, we couldn't find a rice cooker that was, we could find one that was big enough, but it wasn't strong enough to keep up, and so we finally decided we're gonna skip buying a rice cooker and we're just going to make it on the stove, like the way we do in the book. And then we started to take up too much stove space, so now we bought like a big rice cooker. But we came up with that method because we were trying to avoid using a rice cooker because it wasn't always working for us.
Well, I can't wait to try it. I want you to explain some cooking terms.
Okay.
One is velveting, which is a Chinese term.
Yes, so velveting, if you go to your favorite Chinese place, hopefully it's Myers and Chang, and you eat beef or chicken or something, you'll notice that it's got a really soft, tender texture. And that's from a technique called velveting, where you take, for example, the chicken and you pass it really quickly through a wok of hot oil. So you're essentially, you're not really deep frying it because it's only in there for probably 3 or 4 seconds. But what you're doing is you're covering it with a coating of oil, which locks in the juices. And then you pass it through and then drain it out, and then all the oil you use for something else. And then you do your stir fry. And the result is that the meat is really, really tender.
Chow fun.
So chow fun is a type of noodle. They're the wide rice noodles. And we don't have it on the menu anymore, but a beef and broccoli chow fun. And so in the book we have fun sauce, it was a fun name, but it's also just the sauce for the chow fun. But chow fun is those wide rice noodles.
What is pork belly?
Pork belly is, so I don't eat pork, so I don't really, to me it's fatty and I don't really love it, but it's bacon that hasn't been baconed.
Okay. Good. Nasi goreng, Indonesian.
Nasi goreng is an Indonesian fried rice. It's a very traditional fried rice that's made with terasi paste, which is a very, very pungent and very flavorful paste that's made out of chilies and garlic and dried shrimp. And in fact, we make it at the restaurant probably once or twice a week. And when we do, we try to do it in the middle of the day when there are a few people in the restaurant, like in between lunch and dinner. And then we open up the entire backloading dock and we open up the front door because it's so strong, it starts to make your eyes water. But you make the nasi goreng with this terasi paste and it's amazing. It's so good.
The Chinese condiment XO.
XO is it's a Hong Kong seafood sauce that's made primarily with dried shrimp and dried scallop. That's it's an easy thing to add on to stir-fried vegetables or just stir into some congee, even mix it into a salad. It would probably be delicious.
And is it true that you always carry chopsticks in your purse?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to go over my personal baking pet peeves.
Yes.
Rancid nuts in pastries.
Yes.
It's very common. And nobody is tasting the nuts. Okay,
I agree.
Cakes not baked long enough, biscuits not baked long enough, cookies not baked long enough. Everything not baked long enough.
Yeah. I agree. I especially don't like when tart shells aren't baked long enough.
Me too.
Or croissant, or any sort of thing that's supposed to have the flour all the way cooked through. It doesn't make any sense to me either.
Stale spices, what is your rule about that?
I mean, at the bakery we go through them
yes,
so quickly.
Of course.
Yeah,
yes.
But you should.
Home cooks, home bakers.
Home bakers, you need. I mean, now you can go buy the small little quantities at like a co-op or something.
This is something that, I mean, I know people who love to bake who do this all the time. Imitation vanilla.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if they don't have their glasses on when they go to the store and they don't see the word imitation.
Possibly.
Leaving salt out of a baking recipe.
Salt is a big one for us, and it's one of the lessons. So I have a new book coming out in the fall called Pastry Love, and I was actually just turned it in yesterday, I hope it's the final edit. And one of the top tips is using salt, and I try to preach this to anybody who bakes because I feel like we all know, if you cook, you know to use salt. But if you bake, a lot of people don't think about it, and they don't understand that salt does the exact same thing for pastries that it does for savory food, which is it highlights flavors. And so the best, I always try to catch the lemon curd, the chocolate pudding, and the vanilla anglaise before and after salted. So when they're making it, and I can take the baker and say, okay, try it now, and then we add all of the salt, and now try it. And you can see such a drastic difference because it really does wake up all of those flavors.
Mm-hmm. So now we're going to play a game I call buy or sell. So buy is yes,
okay,
and sell is no.
Okay.
Store-bought pie shells.
Store-bought?
Pie shells.
So buy is no.
Buy is yes,
sell.
And sell is no. Okay. Store-bought Oreos.
Oh, I mean, buy for certain occasions.
I can't believe it's not butter.
Sell.
Chocolate with chilies.
I mean, for me, sell, but I understand that people like to buy it.
Cakes made with olive oil or vegetable oil.
Buy.
Soft, cakey cookies.
Buy.
Pan banging.
Oh, buy.
Salt-topped cookies.
For me, sell, but I understand, again, people like to buy that.
Soy milk in baking.
Buy.
Bottled tea.
Oh, no, sell.
Bottled coffee.
No, sell.
Rotisserie chickens.
Okay, I bought a lot of rotisserie chickens.
Okay.
I'm
It's
always
a buy.
hopeful. I'm hopeful,
Okay.
but at this point, I think I should just sell.
Okay. Canned chicken stock.
Oh, sell.
Crisco.
Sell.
Home bakers on Instagram.
Buy.
Frozen puff pastry.
Buy.
Sumac, Aleppo pepper, and pomegranate molasses and baked goods.
Buy.
Tahini babka.
Buy.
Nutella.
Personally, I don't like hazelnuts, so sell.
Chickpea flour.
Buy.
Roast chicken carcass.
Buy.
Cut up marinated meats in the supermarket.
Sell.
Instant coffee. Baked goods.
Oh, in baked goods?
Mm-hmm.
Buy.
Silpat baking mats.
Buy.
Trader Joe's frozen cooked rice.
I've never had it. Sell.
Very popular. Parmesan rind.
Oh, buy.
Okay, so now we're going to, if you have all, where is this? Hopefully it's here. There are questions coming in.
Yeah, if you just go to slido.com on the internet and you'll see, there it is, and CC 401 I think was the, and these are a few questions that are coming in.
Okay. Are they on my phone, Amy?
They should be on your phone.
Okay. They're not quite yet. Let me just look up here and see what's here. Okay. What is your favorite restaurant in Boston?
Other than Myers and Chang, I would say Cafe Sushi. We love sushi.
What is your favorite meal to cook?
Roast chicken with vegetables. Very simple.
How'd you feel the moment you heard Karen Akunowitz's won the 2018 Beard Award? What role do you feel you've played in her success?
Christopher and I were at the Beard Awards with Karen when she won, and we were ecstatic. I mean, at that point, she'd been nominated 3 or 4 times, I think. And we were just waiting. We knew it would happen, we just didn't know when. And I feel that we've definitely played a role in her success, and I'm proud of that. I spent 7 years with her to try to teach her and mentor her and guide her, and she taught me a bunch of things too, and we're very close, and I'm very proud of her.
Do you have plans for opening Myers & Chang or Flower in other cities?
We don't. At this point, Myers & Chang will stay its own special little thing. And then Flower, we're hoping to open a couple more Flowers, but they would be within Boston.
There was another question that came in. How can you be in all those places at once? How do you do that?
I bike, which helps, and they're all physically...
You bike between them?
Yeah, they're physically close to each other. And in fact, we were going to do this really cool thing.
You used to run between them.
I did, but...
When there were fewer.
Exactly, when there were fewer and I was younger. Okay. But we had this idea of doing some sort of flower race. Like, we wanted to do a fundraiser, and I don't think we're going to do it for this year, but if any of you are runners and want to try, or walkers, and then we'll do it maybe next year, and it would be one of those walkathons, but you would have to go to every flower and get, like, I don't know what you would do, but I don't know, but then you would stamp or something, but then you could win something, and we would raise money for something, and so.
Dietary restrictions, welcome challenge or a pain in the butt?
I mean, anytime somebody has a true dietary restriction, it's a welcome challenge. What's frustrating is when somebody says they have a dietary restriction, and then we go through all of the things to adhere to that, and then they say, oh, never mind. That happens a lot, where people will say,
I've heard that from chefs.
Yeah, I'm gluten-free, and we're like, okay, great, we're going to change out everything and make it gluten-free, and then they reach for that bread basket.
How much of baking is science versus gut feel?
So the way I like to explain baking, because everybody thinks you have to be a certain way to be a baker, is that yes, you do have to understand the science of baking up to a certain point, but once you become familiar with it, then there's a lot of gut feel. And so once you have like the right foundation, then baking can be just as improvisational as cooking.
And my question last, do you ever bake at home?
No. Christopher's always so upset.
Okay. We're going to go out in the lobby and have some tastes of something that Joanne brought. Do you want to explain what you brought and how you happen to make that particular thing your specialty?
Yes. So we have in the lobby for all of you is a mini sticky bun. The sticky bun is one of the things that we're famous for, and I'll tell quickly the story. In 2007, we had just opened the second Flower. And somebody called me from the Food Network and said, we are interested in filming a new food show called The Science of Sweets, and we understand that you have a math science background and that you might be interested in helping us film the pilot episode. So I said, I would love that. That would be so amazing. And they came to Boston for 2 days and in a hotel room, and they had me film the opening credits of this new show called The Science of Sweets. And so they asked me to bring sticky buns, which I did, and they had protractors and all sorts of rulers, and they had this big whiteboard, and they had me write the Fibonacci sequence, and so I was doing all of this and talking about sticky buns, and the whole time I'm thinking this has nothing to do with, science, but whatever, they know what they're doing, and it's just the pilot episode. So that was day 1 and day 2. At the end of day 2, they brought me to the bakery, and they said, okay, we would like you to teach an audience. We've got a studio audience, and they brought a bunch of people to the new bakery. We want you to teach them how to make sticky buns. And I said, okay, so I'm explaining, and I'm up on a table, and I'm showing everybody. And again, in my mind, this is The Science of Sweets, the pilot episode. And I'm, rolling, and all of a sudden I hear cheers and roars, and I'm thinking, wait, I haven't done it yet. I haven't de-panned the sticky buns, which is when people get really excited. I'm like, hold on. And I look up, and Bobby Flay is walking in. And I didn't know anything about like this show. I didn't know anything about Throwdown. But Christopher, who's in the restaurant business, knows Bobby Flay. So I thought Bobby was visiting Christopher and stopped by at the restaurant, at the bakery. So I'm like doing my thing. I hear the cheers. I look up and I see him. And I'm like, hold on. I'm in the middle of something. So they cut the camera and they're like, no, he's here for you. And I was like, no, I'm doing this show. And they said, there is no show. And I'm like, there's no show? And they said, no, you're being challenged to a Throwdown. And I said, what happened to the Science of Sweets? And they said, no, that doesn't exist. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. I said, really? And I said, no, he's here to challenge you. So then he had been baking off-site, and he brought his team and his sticky buns. And then it's a totally blind tasting with judges, and Flour Sticky Buns won. That was in 2007. And kind of our lives kind of changed from that moment on. We were making 30 to 40 sticky buns a day before that, and then after that, we literally could not keep up. And for about a year, we struggled every day to make enough sticky buns. And I even had people call me really angry at me because we didn't have enough sticky buns. And now we've finally gotten better at it, and I think we still sometimes don't make enough, but we're better. So anyway, that's what you get to try.
So you're all going to have them, and thank you very much. This is really great. Yeah.
Joining us from Palo Alto.